Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of Integration Television. Today's show, we have some interesting news, and our feature interview is with Rob Fox of Liaison Technologies in Atlanta, Georgia. So first, the news. Let's talk about two very interesting reports that have recently been released. One from Accenture. Their Emerging Technology Report of 2012 has some really meaty material on big data and the impact of big data on organizations. This is becoming, as I'm sure all our viewers know, a considerable topic of discussion in many areas, and the Accenture perspective is very interesting. As usual, we will always put the links to these reports. These are all publicly available reports that we're talking about, so we'll put some links up to the location of where viewers can download those reports. Our second report is from Gartner, and it is the state of data integration in 2012. And this is a report that's available through a download. So I can't put a link up, but we will embed the search term that you need to search for, but you will find it. It's very easily accessible. So it's the Gartner State of Data Integration 2012 report. It's an analyst report, and it's Gartner's view of where integration technology is today. And it's very interesting because it highlights a couple of areas that are of particular interest and should be of particular interest to our viewers. One is the fact that integration today, as data volumes go up in organization, both transactional data and non-transactional data, then integration is absolutely key. The other element that is now starting to get good traction, and that is the element of business intelligence, or BI, and how critical BI is. And one of the areas that the report talks about is the amount of flexibility that's available to consumers with the tools that are available. So some very interesting stuff there. We'll post those links. I also wanted to talk about the launch recently of Silicon Halton's Big Data and BI peer-to-peer group. Chris Herbert over at Silicon Halton has started this group. And it's a gathering of individuals who are interested in big data and BI. So I encourage any of our viewers in the Halton region outside of Toronto to take a look at the Silicon Halton website. I have one final thing for the news, and that is I've got to thank our friends over at the Aurora EDI Alliance who, after viewing our Christmas special, our episode, I believe it was episode 4, I can't remember now, it's been a while, kindly sent us this video for some inspirational ideas, and it is the wonderful Red-Green Christmas. For those viewers who don't know Red-Green, it's a Canadian television show of a bunch of lumberjacks out in a cabin, and this is their Christmas special. So I want to thank the Aurora EDI Alliance for this. A very kind gift and some kind words that went along with the DVD. We'll have to be looking at that for our year-end episode. So now on to our feature interview with Rob Fox of Liaison Technology. Rob is a software developer by training. He's a system designer. And his interview really is a follow-on to Hollis Tibbetts' interview in episode 6, where we talked about the build versus buy argument. So Rob in this feature interview, which was filmed in Atlanta, is going to talk to us about what goes into the creation of an integration application, an integration stack, from a commercial software developer's perspective. Hi, and welcome to Integration TV. I'm your host, Robin Smith, and I'm coming to you today from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here with Rob Fox, who is the Senior Director of Software Development for Liaison Technologies, whose headquarters are actually here in Atlanta. Rob has kindly agreed to join me today to discuss an enterprise corporate view of software development and the development of an integration stack. Very different, and a follow-up interview to what we had in our last episode with Hollis Tibbetts in the discussion with Hollis regarding build versus buy, that old argument. So today I thought it'd be very useful to talk to somebody who's in the nitty-gritty of software development, and I'm joined by Rob. Rob, thank you for being here today. I'd like to quickly introduce you. Rob comes with a long resume of lots of experience on the standards committee of the NCX 12 group, lead architect and designer of the Liaison Delta product, EDI Notepad, co-architect on the Liaison ECS product. So Rob, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Rob, in our last interview, I had a good discussion with Hollis regarding that age-old argument that you see in the mid-market space, which is, well, should I buy it or should I build it? And Hollis came to the table with a lot of really good reasons for why a company should really look at off-the-shelf software. And one of those was the combined experience that goes into a product, such as Liaison's ECS and Delta. And it'd be interesting to hear some of the things that go into actually software design as it relates to the integration stack.
Well, it's definitely, I've been doing this for a long time. Delta was an interesting evolution because the company that I was from originally, SoftShare, we built the translation component, which is a component of the integration stack. Of course, there's many other things, such as the communication layer. I learned a lot, but in doing the translation piece alone, which is the middle, which at its core is just trying to take data from source A and manipulate it for target B, we learned a lot in trying to adapt it to our customers' needs. And over the years, we had to evolve that model because the industry moves so fast. And I think one of the pitfalls that people run into, I made some of these same mistakes early on as I was learning the industry, is you build for what you see, or you build for the problems of the day, and you really get yourselves into a position where it's a never-ending battle to try to make a solid integration stack yourself, because you mentioned the collective intelligence you get from working with others and other people's experience, but the same is true for building a data integration stack because of that very same reason. The standards.
That's a very good point you make about seeing only the things that are important to you without taking into context. And this was a point that Hollis highlighted, and to me it's very interesting to hear you speak to that issue, that in fact you see what you want to see, and when you try to do that DIY or you try to build it yourself, you're really constrained not only by your budgets, although in software development you are constrained by your budgets, but you've got a mindset or a vision of what you want to accomplish, but it may not necessarily cover off all of the what-ifs. And are there any examples like that? I think perhaps of audit trail, but are there examples like that that you could share with the audience of some of those issues that
Oh, definitely. We get in the middle all the time. Our goal is to try to produce something that's generic enough to adapt to customer environment, where we don't know which protocols they're going to have to implement as far as communication or what data standards might be at play. But I've run into cases where customers building a solution for, let's say, something simple, a CSV file that they're producing, and then taking that and producing a format for their trading partner. And they only can, if they have a specification, then they'll build to it, and there's always interpretation in every specification. But tools are rigid. When you build, you tend to build them rigid. So when you have problems, let's say I send something to a trading partner, or vice versa, and you have to mitigate, you're looking at time and effort just to every time the problem occurs, and it hasn't been built, generally it isn't built into the integration stack if you're doing it yourself. Yeah.
So in terms of the integration stack, we've talked about the data transformation layer, which in and of itself is a separate subset of that stack. What happens when it comes to the communication layer? I think of all the protocols now that are out there. We've got AS1, AS2, AS3, Secure FTP. We've got web services. When you look at that daunting task of trying to build it all yourself, to me it just seems like an overwhelming thing. And the amount of knowledge that one needs to have
you have to ask yourself, why are you getting into the integration game to begin with? If you're trying to communicate with a trading partner, for example, then you got to be thinking about what is your goal in business? It's to grow.
Yeah.
Whether it's add volume to a trading partner, add more trading partners, whatever the case may be, which means you can't always anticipate the requirements that are going to be dictated, especially if you're the smaller of the fish in the sea. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You're told you must do things a certain way, or you don't do business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you want to pick tools that are versatile, that are up to date. Something as simple as an RFC around S-MIME or AS2 or something like that. If changes are made, are you making those changes? Do you even know that changes to a specification have happened?
Just a quick point of clarification for the audience. An RFC is?
Well, it's a request for comment.
Okay.
But it
forms the standard, I guess?
That's correct. There's a standards committee. There's a process for submitting. Anybody can submit a request for comment, which is becomes an industry, goes from being a draft to an official standard.
Okay.
Everything from the format of an email address actually has an RFC that says, these are the rules about how an email address can be formed. And that's just one little teeny component. And if you think about the building blocks of integration, and every little piece, whether it's that email address or if you're communicating over a secure method like FTP, there's governance for how the certificates need to be handled, what standards are in use for different, varying degrees of security. And they're not static, they change with business. So implementing them all correctly to adhere to these standards so that you can interop with your trading partners. This is daunting. If you're, it's one thing if you're in a silo and you're just trying to maximize your efficiency, but nobody works in a vacuum.
So the argument of the DIY guy, or the company that hires the programmer, the one-man band programmer, who comes along and says, yeah, but I've got this off-the-shelf product, I can do this part with this piece, I can do this part with this piece, and maybe I'm going to go out and get some other product to do the data transformation. There's clearly pitfalls around that as well. I mean, to me, what I see is perhaps the whole notion of audit trail. And how important is the audit trail in having a proper integration flow?
Well, there's two aspects of audit that I see. One is internal, for you basically when things don't go right, you need to be able to track the why, the where, the how. But there's also, there could be responsibility out to whether it's a trading partner who's asking you, or maybe there's regulation involved, maybe there's, depending on what type of industry you're in. All those things come into play. And as important as auditing is, to me, is handling exceptions. I think there's nothing more detrimental to a business than what I call unhandled exceptions, which is when things don't go right. And everybody programs, and you want to set it and forget it and hope that the integration pattern runs smoothly. Then a piece of data comes in that it's not expecting and kicks it out.
And the whole thing collapses.
Yeah, and how nimble can you be, and how agile can your business be to being able to handle those types of issues when they occur?
You made an interesting comment earlier before when we were talking and getting ready. You mentioned the 110-100 rule, and I thought that was a rather interesting comment. Can you extrapolate that one for the viewers? Because I think to me, that really spoke to the notion of why you don't want to build it yourself.
The cost of change. That's really what it comes down to. So the 110-100 rule is for every dollar you spend at the design phase, if you have an exception or an error case that happens at the implementation phase, or in our case, maybe somebody writing a data integration pattern, that's a $10 rough rule of thumb.
Yep.
And then if you deploy into your environment a production integration pattern, and there's a failure, it costs the business $100 or 100-fold the cost at the design time. So you better be really good at design time to minimize the cost of the business.
So is that cost to the business, is that based on just bad data, or is it just bad design?
It can be all of the above. Sometimes bad data is really good data in disguise. I know that's a funny notion, but it's how you handle data. My view has always been, as a consumer of data, be very loose in how you interpret the specification. In other words, you try to build into your infrastructure the ability to handle variance, tolerance, and then when you're producing data to go somewhere else, you need to be model citizen and produce as strict to whatever the RFC or the specifications as you can.
Or the implementation
The
guide.
implementation
or whatever,
guide.
yeah.
And there's, implementation guides are filled with holes too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You look at the government, the 4010 to 5010, the whole reason why there's a new EDI standard being issued by the government in healthcare is to eliminate specifications that say, you may do this, which opens it up to interpretation.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that leads to an interesting point regarding integration complexity. You've been in the business a long time. Have you seen changes in the complexities of integrations, and how has that affected product development? But how also does that affect the guy who thinks they can do it themselves? And as the turnaround to really what you build into commercial products is really a vision and a roadmap of where you want to take those products as well, which somebody, I guess, deep in wine couldn't do because they don't have that scope.
The complexity gets harder and harder to manage as you try to connect more and more pieces together. So as you're a small company and maybe you have one back-end, MRP or just accounting software producing data for one or two trading partners, but as your business grows, you can't maintain that point-to-point relationship. Eventually it breaks down, and that's when you need to start looking at, really, good tools to do things like, implement a canonical or something where you can have a common data architecture that can handle all the different source and target pieces. And that's when things get really interesting. And the way I look at that is businesses, as they mature to that level, they still, even if they're not ready for such a model, they still have to take all that they've done and feed it into this next generation, integration
For
solution.
sure.
And if everything is homegrown, it's almost starting over sometimes.
Well, and you're also limiting the growth of the business. I mean, from just a plain business perspective, the ability to handle all the what ifs, the decision. You certainly alluded to that. That to me seems to be like a very large issue. That in a DIY you just can't possibly cover off all the potential what ifs that get built into your spec documentation, your spec creation, and your dev QA test prod kind of scenario where you're.
It's economics. Business agility it costs to develop that into a solution. And at most DIY, they're trying to solve a problem that's concrete. Not maybe even thinking about the idea of business agility. How can you make the thing that you're implementing be more flexible? The problem is you don't have the collective knowledge per se.
Good point. It's a very good point.
And it's costly because if you're going to, at that point, most DIY looks at it as I'm over-engineering my solution because I have to develop it. Versus shopping for someone like us, where we've been there and we've done that and we've built the agility into the product so that you're busy implementing versus customizing a solution.
Excellent. No, those are very good takeaways for the viewers. Do you have any pearls of wisdom, nuggets on where integration's going? You're clearly someone who's in the space. You live and breathe it. We see this argument today of cloud versus on-premise, hybrid.
You can't avoid the explosion of big data. It's here with the proliferation of social media, just with the amount of data moving is amazingly, incredibly large compared to 5-10 years ago. And to think that you're going to manage all of that data, if you want to have access and aggregate and create sort of a value added to those streams, it gets more and more difficult to do that on-prem. So I think you'll see as you want to tap into more and more data sources, more of that functionality will be moved to cloud. It doesn't mean that the consumer will have a direct or indirect role in that, through like an iPaaS scenario where the customer may still be managing their integration solution, they just may not be hosting it, because once again, it's the ability to scale, handle the volume, handle the complexity, and quite honestly, businesses are also trying to become more agile, and maybe they aren't staffed for that type of implementation. So it starts to make sense.
Interesting. This notion to me of the hybrid, of the coming together, that elastic idea that you can go from one side
to the other, and you can formulate that that sort of approach. Probably a discussion that we're going to have in a future interview. So, Rob, thank you very much. This has been a really, really great conversation. I think there's a lot for our viewers to chew on there. I particularly like the 110-100 rule. I think that's a pearl of wisdom to take away with. So, today, thank you very much. Viewers, if you have any questions, send them to our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV or on our Facebook page. We welcome comments, questions, and I'll see you in our next interview. Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
It's great to be here, Robin.
So great interview there with Rob Fox of Liaison Technology. Rob and I had a really great conversation talking about what went into the building of an integration stack. I particularly liked the 110-100 rule that Rob talked about, and this is a very interesting. It's a very interesting rule for those of you who are contemplating building an integration stack yourselves. There's lots of resources on the internet related to the 110-100 rule, so I do encourage you to search that. So this wraps up our little mini-series we were having on the build versus buy argument. Started off with Hollis Tibbetts talking about why building your integration stack was the dumbest idea possible, and then followed up with this interview with Rob Fox. Coming up on our next couple of interviews, we're going to have a feature interview with a business analyst talking about integration from a business analyst perspective, which will be very useful, I think, for people who are starting to look at data holistically within their organizations. And we'll also have a feature interview on business intelligence and how companies should be looking at data from a business intelligence perspective, and how some of the integration tools out there can facilitate deriving interesting information out of the data that's within organizations using business intelligence. So we'll see you in our next episode, episode 8, and in the meantime, keep the questions coming on our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV, on our Facebook page. If you haven't followed us and you haven't liked us on Facebook, we'd like you to do that. But keep those questions coming. Thank you.